50 stories that will change your life. Dear friends, life is filled with countless stories. Long stories, short stories, joyful ones, and sad ones. Within these stories, hidden lessons and philosophies of life often emerge, helping us to live wiser, more meaningful lives. These stories encourage us to reflect and grow, allowing us to live better, more fulfilled lives. Today, I invite you to take a moment to listen, reflect, and appreciate these brief but powerful stories that may change your perspective on life. Story, The Value of Life. A student once asked his teacher, "Master, what is the value of life?" The teacher handed him a stone and said, "Take this stone to the market, but do not sell it. Just observe how much people are willing to pay for it." Obeying the teacher, the student took the stone to the market. People looked at it, confused, as it was an ugly, ordinary rock. No one showed any interest in buying it. He sat there all day long, disheartened, until finally a beggar approached and offered him 1 coin for the stone. The student returned to the teacher sighing, "Master, the stone is worthless. No one wanted to buy it. I was lucky someone offered me a coin." The teacher smiled and said, "Good. Tomorrow take the stone to a jeweler and try again. But remember, don't sell it, just ask for a price." The next day, the student was surprised when the jeweler offered him 500 coins for the stone. Astonished, he rushed back to the teacher, asking, "Why is this happening?" The teacher chuckled and said, "Tomorrow, take it to an antique shop. But this time, no matter the price offered, do not sell it, just listen." Following his teacher's advice, the student went to an antique store. The shop owner, after examining the stone carefully, offered him everything he owned, his entire fortune, just for that one stone. The student rushed back to his teacher, eager to know why the value of the stone changed so drastically. The teacher calmly explained, "That stone is actually an ancient gem, worth a great fortune, and life is the same way. To some people, life seems worthless, just like that stone. To others, it is invaluable, like a precious gem. The value of life depends on how you see it. The difference lies in understanding. How you choose to value and appreciate life will determine how meaningful it is. Life is valuable, but only when we understand it. Lesson: everyone has a different way of valuing success and happiness. Respect others' choices and make your own life valuable in your own way. Only you can determine the value of your life. Story: The 2 grains of rice. 2 grains of rice were kept aside to be used as seeds for the next planting season. Both grains were large, healthy, and full of potential. One day, the farmer decided to plant them in the nearby field. The first grain of rice thought to itself, "Why should I go? Why should I let my life be destroyed by being buried in the soil? I will keep all my nutrients inside and find a cozy hidden corner in the storage room." So the first grain of rice rolled into a dark corner of the barn, deciding to keep itself safe, away from the harsh reality of the earth. Meanwhile, the second grain of rice eagerly hoped that the farmer would take it to the field. It was excited to begin a new life, to be buried in the soil, to grow and blossom into something greater than itself. As time passed, the first grain of rice, sitting in its safe corner, became dry and shriveled. It had no water, no sunlight, and no chance to grow. It wasted away. On the other hand, the second grain, though buried and broken in the soil, sprouted into a vibrant rice plant. From it grew many more grains of rice, ready to nourish others. Lesson: don't lock yourself away in a shell of safety trying to preserve what you have. Instead, take the risk to grow and contribute to the world. Sometimes we must sacrifice ourselves to bring about something greater. Make the choice to live fully, even if it means facing difficulties along the way. Story: The Frog by the Roadside. A frog, living in a peaceful pond, noticed another frog sitting on the side of the road, exposed to danger. The first frog warned, Come to the pond where it's safe. It's too dangerous here by the road." But the frog by the road replied, "I'm used to it here. I'm comfortable. It's too much effort to move." A few days later, the frog from the pond went to check on the one by the road. He was shocked to find that the frog had been run over by a passing vehicle. Its lifeless body lay in the middle of the road. Lesson: your destiny is in your hands. Life will not wait for you to make a move. If you don't take action and step out of your comfort zone, time will leave you behind. The road you choose to take in life is yours to decide. Don't wait until it's too late to make the right choices. Story: The Ant and the Grasshopper. In the warm summer days, while other creatures were enjoying the sunshine, a little ant was busy walking across the fields gathering wheat and barley to store food for the winter. The grasshopper, seeing the ant working so hard, began to mock it. "Why do you work so much, little ant? Why not relax like the rest of us? The days are long and there's plenty of time for fun." But the ant stayed silent and continued working. As winter approached, the weather grew colder and the skies turned gray. A heavy rain fell and the fields became barren. The grasshopper, now starving and with no food, went to the ant for help. "Please, dear ant," the grasshopper pleaded, "I have no food. Can you spare me some of your harvest?" The ant looked at the grasshopper with a calm expression and replied, "Dear grasshopper, I warned you during the summer. You mocked me for working hard while you played. Now you are suffering from your own choices." The grasshopper hung his head, realizing that the ant was right. "But why didn't you help me?" he asked. The ant replied, "I worked hard and planned ahead because life is unpredictable. Today may be fine, but tomorrow could bring unexpected challenges. Your health might be fine today, but who knows what tomorrow will bring. That's why we must always prepare and plan ahead. Only then can we secure our future." Life lesson: life will not always be easy, and we must make sure to plan for the future. We can't rely on good times to last forever. Without preparation, we risk finding ourselves in difficult situations when we least expect it. Story: The Frogs in the Well. One day, a group of frogs were hopping through the forest, enjoying their walk. Suddenly, two of the frogs fell into a deep well. The other frogs gathered around the well, looking down at the two trapped frogs. "There's no way out," the frogs around the well said. "It's too deep. You will never be able to jump out. It's over for you." But the two frogs, despite hearing the discouraging words, continued trying to jump out of the well with all their strength. The frogs around the well shouted, "Stop! You are just wasting your energy. You're never going to make it out. It's hopeless." One of the frogs, listening to the negative voices, gave up and fell into despair. It stopped trying and soon perished in the well. The other frog, however, kept jumping again and again, even though the others continued to shout at it. With one final mighty leap, it managed to escape the well and landed on solid ground. The other frogs were astonished. They gathered around the frog that had made it out and asked, "Why didn't you listen to us? We told you to give up." The frog, smiling, replied, "I couldn't hear you. I'm deaf. I thought you were all cheering me on." Life lesson: never let the negative voices of others stop you from striving for your goals. Sometimes success is just one more effort away. The voices around you may discourage you, but if you believe in yourself and keep pushing, you can overcome any challenge. Story: The Fox and the Grapes. One afternoon, a hungry fox was strolling through the forest and came across a bunch of ripe grapes hanging from a vine high up in a tree. The fox's mouth watered as it gazed at the grapes. "These would quench my thirst and satisfy my hunger," it thought. So the fox took a few steps back, preparing to leap up and grab the grapes. But no matter how high it jumped, it couldn't quite reach the grapes. The fox tried again and again, but each time it fell short. Frustrated, the fox stepped back, looked at the grapes one last time, and then said, "Well, they're probably sour anyway," and walked away. Life lesson. When people cannot get what they want, they sometimes convince themselves that it wasn't worth having in the first place. This is a form of self-deception, where we make excuses to avoid feeling bad about our own limitations. In reality, it's not about the grapes. It's about our ability to accept our limitations and move forward without bitterness. Story: The Boy and the Coin. A new teacher at school noticed a student who was constantly teased by his classmates. This boy was always called stupid by others. During recess, the teacher approached a group of students who were laughing at the boy and asked them why they were picking on him. "Because he's stupid, teacher," one of the boys replied. "If you gave him a choice between a large coin worth $5 and a smaller coin worth $10, he'd choose the larger coin just because it's bigger." Curious, the teacher went to the boy and asked him, "Why did you choose the larger coin instead of the smaller one, which is worth more?" The boy, without hesitation, responded, "I chose the larger coin because it looked bigger. I didn't understand that the smaller coin was worth more. I just thought the big one was better." After school, the teacher approached the boy again, this time gently explaining, "The larger coin may look better, but the smaller coin has more value. In life, you can't always judge things by their appearance. Sometimes what looks good on the outside isn't what's best for you." Life lesson: don't judge things by their size or appearance. Just because something seems bigger or more appealing doesn't mean it's the best choice. In life, we need to look deeper, understand the true value of things, and make informed decisions. A lesson in humility. The story of the boy and the scholar. When you read this story, you might initially think the boy comes across as clueless, but that's not the full picture. There's a saying that a fool who acts dangerous isn't truly scary. What's far more frightening is a dangerous person who pretends to be foolish, so don't underestimate the person in front of you. They might not be as ignorant as you think. Here's a very short story about a coin that will make you rethink how you view those around you. The Scholar and the Peasant. A scholar and a peasant were traveling together on a boat across a river. The scholar, proud of his knowledge, declared that he was well versed in many subjects. To pass the time, he suggested they play a guessing game. He proposed that if he lost, he would give the peasant 10 coins, but if the peasant lost, he would only have to give the scholar 5 coins. The scholar thought of it as a way to show off his superior intellect by letting the peasant win a little. The first riddle the peasant posed was this: what weighs 1,000 pounds in the river but only 10 pounds on land? The scholar scratched his head, thinking deeply, but could not come up with an answer. After a long while of fruitless thinking, he had no choice but to hand over 10 coins to the peasant. "Now," the scholar asked, "what is the answer?" The peasant simply replied, "I don't know." And, as if to add insult to injury, he handed 5 coins back to the scholar, saying, "Sorry, but I managed to earn 5 coins." The scholar was stunned. What had just happened? The lesson of humility. This story teaches a valuable lesson about pride and humility. Many people like to show off their intelligence and look down on those who seem less educated or less knowledgeable. But often, their arrogance leads them into embarrassing situations. They fail to realize that too much pride can actually be their downfall. A person who acts overly confident in their intelligence can often make a fool of themselves. The real danger in life isn't from those who seem foolish. It's from those who act as though they're smarter than they actually are. So in life, don't be afraid of the truly intelligent. Be wary of those who mistakenly believe they are. Always choose to be humble, and you'll earn the respect of others. A story about my father and the burnt toast. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, I remember that sometimes my mother would burn the toast while baking bread. One evening, after a long day at work, my mother came home and prepared dinner for the family. She served us some slices of toast that were not just a little burnt, they were completely charred, like coal. I sat there looking at the toast, wondering if anyone would say something about it. But my father simply ate his slice of bread and asked about my homework, as if nothing was unusual. He didn't comment on the burnt bread at all. Finally, my mother apologized to him, saying she had accidentally burned the toast. But my father replied with a smile, "I actually like burnt toast." That night, as I wished him good night, I asked him, "Do you really like burnt toast, Dad?" He put his arm around me and said, "Your mother had a long, tiring day at work. She's exhausted, and she did the best she could. A slice of burnt toast can't hurt anyone. But you know what can really hurt people? Harsh, critical words, especially when they are unkind." He continued, "You see, life is full of imperfections. People are flawed. I forget birthdays and anniversaries sometimes, just like many other people. What I've learned over the years is this: it's not about being perfect, it's about accepting each other's flaws, it's about supporting each other's differences." The true meaning of love and compassion. My father went on to explain, "This is the key to building healthy, mature, and lasting relationships. Life is too short to wake up every day filled with regrets or frustrations. We must cherish the people who are kind to us and learn to empathize with those who may not always act in the way we expect." This lesson taught me the importance of showing compassion and understanding. We should learn to appreciate the weaknesses and limitations of others, whether they are our family members, friends, or colleagues. Compassion toward others is what builds strong, meaningful relationships. It's the foundation of true love. A final thought. So, what have we learned from these stories? It's not enough to be smart or clever. It's far more important to be humble, understanding, and compassionate. In life, we will encounter many people who are not perfect, who have flaws, and who might not always do things the way we expect. But if we approach them with kindness and empathy, we can create stronger, healthier relationships. Remember, it's not the burnt toast or the riddle you fail to solve that matters. What matters most is how you respond with love, understanding, and humility. The power of humility. Humility is a powerful trait. It teaches us to be patient with others and ourselves. It reminds us that while no one is perfect, we can still choose to show kindness and grace. Let us always strive to be the kind of person who is not quick to judge but quick to empathize. Let us choose to build each other up instead of tearing each other down. In life, let us remember that every person we meet is fighting a battle we know nothing about. Show compassion, be humble, and above all, be kind. Story: The Wise King and the Road of Life. Once upon a time, in a prosperous kingdom, there lived a king who ruled with wisdom and strength. One day, the king embarked on a long journey across rugged mountains and valleys. As he returned to the palace, he complained that his feet were aching terribly. It was the first time he had ever traveled such a long distance, and the rough, jagged paths made it even more painful. The king, feeling desperate, decided that the entire kingdom should be covered with leather to soften the roads and make his travels more comfortable. This decision was both extreme and costly. It would require an enormous amount of leather and a tremendous amount of money. But before he could act, the king's wife, with a gentle heart, asked him a simple but wise question. Why not use a small piece of leather to cover your own feet instead of covering the entire kingdom? The king was taken aback by her question. After a moment of thought, he realized that she was right. There was no need to alter the entire world around him. Instead, he could simply change himself. So, the king ordered a pair of sturdy shoes to be made for himself. The lesson here is profound. To live a happier life, we often do not need to change the world around us. We can change ourselves. By changing our own mindset, our hearts, and our perspective, the world around us will seem more beautiful, more harmonious. Change begins with you, and when you change, everything changes. Story: The Train and the Lost Shoe. On a busy highway, a man named Gandhi was traveling on a train when, by accident, he dropped one of his new shoes out of the window. Passengers around him looked at the lost shoe with sympathy, but Gandhi, instead of feeling sorrow or regret, did something unexpected. He threw his other shoe out the window as well. The people around him were stunned. Why would anyone throw away a perfectly good shoe? Gandhi calmly explained, "No matter how expensive the shoes are, they're no use to me now. If someone happens to find them, they might be able to use them." His action startled the crowd, but it carried a deep message. Sometimes when we face inevitable loss or suffering, it is better to let go early and move on, instead of clinging to what cannot be undone. Holding on to the past only causes more pain, while letting go opens us up to new possibilities. Story: The Bargain with the Old Egg Seller. One day, a young woman asked an old man who was selling eggs on the street, "How much is one egg?" The old man replied, $1 for 2 eggs. The woman, trying to negotiate, said, "Give me 4 eggs for $1, or I won't buy any." The old man, with a weary smile, agreed. "All right, take 4 eggs for $1, he said. As the girl walked away, she felt proud of her bargain, thinking she had gotten a good deal. Later, she went to a fancy restaurant with her friends, ordering whatever they desired. When the bill came, it totaled $420. She handed the waiter $500 and told him, "Keep the change." The lesson here is a painful one. Many people are quick to be generous with the wealthy, but often forget the kindness that should be shown to those who are struggling. The old egg seller gave in to her request because he didn't want to lose the sale, but the girl, in her moment of luxury, didn't even consider the man's hardships. This story reminds us to practice generosity and compassion, not just with those who can afford it, but especially with those who have less. Story: The Monk's Journey and the Unnecessary Preparations. There was once a monk who was preparing to leave on a long journey. He spoke to his master, "Master, I will leave next week. I have asked someone to make me a few pairs of shoes from grass, and once they are ready, I will set off." The master, deep in thought, replied, "What if instead you ask the people to donate shoes for your journey?" The monk was puzzled, but agreed. The next day, many people came to offer shoes, and by the end of the day, the room was filled with dozens of pairs. The following morning, someone else brought a large umbrella, offering it to the monk for protection from the rain. By nightfall, there were nearly 50 umbrellas in the monk's room. The monk was surprised by the outpouring of generosity, but his master had something to say. "Do you think you can carry all these shoes and umbrellas on your journey? Can you predict how many shoes will wear out or how many umbrellas will break on your way?" The monk hesitated, but his master continued, "What is important in life is not the amount of preparation we make for the journey, but the determination and clarity of our purpose. No matter how many shoes or umbrellas we gather, it is our resolve that will carry us through. If you are determined, everything else becomes secondary." The monk then understood. The lesson was clear. Success in life doesn't come from external preparations, but from inner strength and clarity of purpose. The most important thing is to set your heart on the right path, and once you do, everything else will follow. Story: The Poor Man and the Rich Man's Son. One day, a wealthy father took his son to visit a small, impoverished village. The father wanted to show his son just how poor some people could be. They spent the day touring the farm of a struggling family, observing their humble living conditions. When they returned, the father asked his son, "So, what did you think of the trip?" The son replied, "It was amazing, Dad." The father then asked, "Did you see how poor they were?" "Yes, I saw it," the son said. "Tell me, what did you learn from this visit?" the father inquired. The boy began to reflect aloud. "We have a dog, but they have 4. We have a swimming pool, and they have rivers. We use lamps at night, but they have stars in the sky. We have walls to protect us, and they have friends. We have a TV, but they spend time with family and relatives." The father sat quietly, unable to speak. The boy added, "Thank you, Dad, for showing me just how poor we really are." The lesson from this story is profound. We are not truly rich just because we have money. Real wealth lies in love, compassion, friendship, and the values we hold dear. Family is what truly makes us rich. Story: The Struggling Caterpillar. One day, a man noticed a caterpillar struggling to emerge from its cocoon. The caterpillar was desperately trying to squeeze its body through a tiny opening. The man sat down and watched for hours, hoping the little creature would succeed. After a long while, the caterpillar seemed to get stuck. Feeling sorry for it, the man decided to help. He took a pair of scissors and cut open the remaining part of the cocoon. The caterpillar was free, but its body was swollen, and its wings were tiny and shriveled. The man waited patiently, hoping the wings would expand and the caterpillar would fly. But it never happened. The poor creature spent the rest of its life crawling around, unable to fly. The man, puzzled, thought he had done a kind deed. Little did he know, the struggle to break free from the cocoon was essential for the caterpillar's transformation. It was through that struggle that the caterpillar would have developed its wings and emerged as a butterfly. The lesson here is powerful. Life's struggles and challenges are necessary for growth. We must push through difficulties to overcome our limitations and spread our wings, becoming the best versions of ourselves. Story: The Honest Merchant and the Butter. There was a farmer who regularly sold butter to a baker. One day, the baker decided to weigh the butter to ensure he was getting the right amount. To his surprise, he found that the quantity was less than what he had requested. Angrily, the baker took the farmer to court. The judge asked the farmer to explain how he had been weighing the butter. The farmer replied, "Your Honor, I am a simple man, and I don't have any special weighing equipment. I only have this scale." The judge was curious. "Then how did you weigh the butter?" The farmer explained, "Many years ago, the baker started buying butter from me, and I started buying bread from him. Each time the baker brought me a loaf of bread, I would place it on the scale and give him the equivalent weight in butter." The farmer continued, "So, if anyone is to blame here, it is the baker." The lesson of this story is simple but profound. In life, you get back what you give. If you cheat or deceive others, you will eventually receive the same treatment. Life is never truly unfair. It always balances out. Story: The King and the Stone on the Road. In ancient times, a king decided to test his people. He ordered a huge stone to be placed in the middle of a busy road, and then he hid behind some bushes to see what would happen. Many people, including wealthy merchants and royal officials, passed by. They all saw the stone, but instead of moving it, they simply went around it, some even complaining about the king's poor road maintenance. No one did anything to remove the stone. Then a poor farmer came along, carrying a heavy load of vegetables. When he saw the stone, he put down his load, tried to move the stone, and after much effort, he succeeded. To his surprise, as he moved the stone, he found a purse lying where it had been. The purse contained gold coins and a note from the king, saying that the gold was for the person who had moved the stone. The lesson is clear. Every obstacle in life is an opportunity for growth. While others may complain, those with the right heart and determination will create their own opportunities by working hard and helping others. Story: The Box Full of Kisses. Once a father became angry with his young daughter. She had wasted a beautiful roll of yellow gift paper, something that was hard to come by in their family since their finances were tight. The father thought it was foolish for her to use the paper to decorate a box, especially when there was no money for such luxuries. However, on Christmas Day, the daughter handed her father the box with a smile. She said, "This is for you, Dad." The father was taken aback. Still angry and confused, he opened the box only to find it was empty. Furious, he scolded her, "Don't you know that when you give someone a gift, it should contain something inside?" The little girl's eyes filled with tears as she said, "But Dad, the box isn't empty. I filled it with kisses, all for you." Moved by her words, the father felt ashamed of his earlier anger. Sometime later, the girl tragically passed away in an accident. The father kept the empty box by his bedside for many years. Whenever he felt hopeless or lonely, he would open the box and remember the love and warmth his daughter had given him. The lesson of this story is powerful. Love is the most precious gift one can give, and it is never truly empty. It fills our hearts with joy, warmth, and meaning. Story, The Best Friend. Two best friends were crossing a desert together. During the journey, they had an argument, and one friend slapped the other across the face. The one who was slapped felt the sting of the blow, but instead of saying anything, he wrote in the sand, "Today, my best friend slapped me in the face." They continued walking and eventually reached an oasis where they decided to bathe and refresh themselves. Unfortunately, the friend who had been slapped got stuck in the mud and nearly drowned. His friend saved him just in time. Once the man had recovered, he wrote on a stone, "Today, my best friend saved my life." The other man, puzzled, asked, "Why did you write in the sand when I hurt you, but now you write in stone when I helped you?" The man replied, "When someone hurts us, we should write it down in the sand where the winds of forgiveness can erase it. But when someone does something good for us, we should write it in stone where it lasts forever." The lesson is beautiful. In life, we should forgive those who hurt us and remember those who help us. Let go of the past and cherish the kindness shown to us. When we receive something good from someone, we must carve it into stone, a place where no wind can ever erase it. This is the essence of forgiveness and gratitude. It gives true meaning to life. Above all, approach every circumstance with an open heart. You will recognize the true sincerity of others through such openness. Story, The Land of God. There is a story from a remote town in South Africa, Wellington, many centuries ago. Due to the area's inaccessibility, the railway company wanted to build a railway line through this region. However, most of the land required for this construction was owned by a stubborn farmer who refused to sell his ancestral land. As a result, the matter seemed to have reached a deadlock. One day, the farmer's young son suddenly spoke up. "Father, I understand now. Did our ancestors not receive this land as a gift from God? Isn't this land a blessing from Him?" "Of course, son," the father replied. "If God now desires to reclaim part of this land for the greater good of many people, we have no reason to deny Him." The farmer paused. He had read the Bible countless times, yet he had never understood this aspect of handling life. After a moment of reflection, he decided to donate the entire piece of land required for the railway project to the railway company without asking for any compensation. From then on, the small station in Wellington became known as the Land of God. This story teaches us that kindness is a natural trait within us. It is an act that flows from the heart and leads us to the right path. Story, The Mouse and the Rice Jar. Once a mouse fell into a jar of rice. The jar was half full, and this unexpected incident made the mouse overjoyed. After confirming that there was no immediate danger, it began its life of eating and sleeping in the jar, eating and sleeping without a care. The fisherman, seeing this, handed him a dry branch. The monk used it to lift the scorpion from the water, saving it once again. The fisherman chuckled and said, "Compassion is good, but compassion must also be practiced with wisdom. You must also take care of yourself. Compassion must have its limits." The Zen master smiled and replied, "Indeed, compassion is the way, but it does not mean we must harm ourselves in the process. True compassion means understanding and acting wisely." Story, The Worth of Gold versus Mud. A Zen master once asked a seeker, What is more valuable to you, a lump of gold or a pile of mud? The seeker answered without hesitation, "Of course, gold is more valuable." The Zen master smiled and asked, "But what if you were a seed? Which would you choose, the gold or the mud?" The seeker was puzzled. The Zen master continued, "Sometimes in life we must change the way we view things. Perhaps if we shift our perspective, we may discover the value in things we previously overlooked." Story: The Seeker, who is called a genius and a fool. A young man once approached a Zen master and said, "Some people call me a genius while others call me a fool. What do you think?" The Zen master asked, "How do you see yourself?" The young man, confused, didn't know how to answer. The Zen master explained with an analogy. Imagine you have a kilogram of rice. To a cook, it's just a few bowls of rice. To a baker, it's enough to make some pastries. To a wine cellar, it's just a few cups of rice wine. The rice remains the same, but it is viewed differently depending on the perspective. The Zen master continued, "Just as rice can be seen in different ways, you are who you are, regardless of how others see you. Your worth and abilities are determined by how you view yourself." The young man suddenly understood the lesson. Reflection. Do not fear being looked down upon by others. Fear only the moment you begin to look down on yourself. No one can define your life except you. The path you choose will shape your future. The greatest value in life is recognizing your own worth. Story: The Bet with the Warrior. A warrior approached a Zen master holding a fish in his hand. He said, "Let's make a bet. I'll ask you whether this fish is alive or dead, and you must answer truthfully." The Zen master, sensing the situation, knew that if he answered alive, the warrior would squeeze it to death. If he answered dead, the warrior would let it live. The Zen master replied, "The fish is already dead." The warrior, smiling, released the fish, saying, "You have lost the bet." The Zen master calmly replied, "Yes, I have lost. But in my loss, I saved the life of this fish." Reflection. This story is a reminder that compassion is not just for others, but also for ourselves. The true meaning of compassion is vast and profound, as it helps open our hearts, making us nobler, more aware, and more resilient. Story: The banter between Tuodong and the Zen master. One day, Tuodong Fa visited the Kim Mountain Temple to engage in a discussion with the Zen master, Fat An. The two spent the entire day in deep conversation about Zen. At one point, Tuodong Fa asked, "What do you think of me?" Fat An replied, "You are majestic like a Buddha." Hearing this, Tuodong Fa was delighted. He then asked, "And what do you think of me?" Fat An, who was somewhat rotund and wearing a black robe, replied, "You look like a pile of cow dung." Tuodong Fa was taken aback but thought he had won the argument. He happily went back to his sister, telling her how he had outwitted the Zen master. His sister, Tuo Tiomoyai, listened to his story and smiled. "Brother, you lost." Tuodong Fa was outraged. "How could I have lost? If I lost, why didn't the master respond?" She calmly replied, "Do you think the Buddha is more precious than dung?" Tuodong Fa responded, "Of course, the Buddha is precious." "Then," she said, "the master sees the Buddha, while you only saw the dung. Who do you think lost here?" Tuodong Fa was left speechless, realizing his defeat. Story: The Monk's Wisdom on Patience. Han Shan once asked his teacher, "What should I do when people insult me, belittle me, or treat me poorly?" The teacher replied, "You should be patient, tolerate them, avoid conflict, respect them, and not react negatively. In time, you'll look back and realize that these people were the ones who helped you see yourself more clearly." Reflection. The people who challenge us, who bring difficulty into our lives, often give us the greatest opportunities for self-reflection and personal growth. They show us who we really are. Sometimes the hardest people in our lives are the mirrors that help us find our true selves. They reveal to us the version of ourselves that we don't want to be. Story: The Tea and the Full Cup. Nam-an, a Zen master from Japan's Ming Dynasty, once had a learned scholar come to visit him. The scholar, curious about Zen, was eager to ask the master deep questions. Nam-an welcomed him with tea and began to pour. He poured the tea into the cup, and when it reached the brim, he continued to pour without stopping. The tea overflowed onto the table. The scholar was shocked and said, "Master, the cup is full. Why are you still pouring?" Nam-an paused and said, "You are like this cup. Your mind is already full of your own opinions and beliefs. Until you empty your cup, I cannot teach you." Reflection. This story teaches us that before we can learn, we must let go of our preconceived notions. Whether it's about religion, philosophy, or life itself, we must approach learning with an open and empty mind. Only then can we truly receive new knowledge and insights. Story: The Cursed and the Blessed. One day, the young monk asked his teacher, "Is the world truly as difficult as it seems? Is life full of suffering, as the Buddha taught?" The teacher smiled and said, "The world is neither blessed nor cursed. It is our perceptions and reactions that create our experiences. If you choose to see the world as a place of suffering, it will be. But if you look upon it with compassion and wisdom, it can be a place of peace." Reflection. Our perceptions shape our reality. If we change the way we look at things, we can transform our entire experience of life. In every challenge lies the opportunity for growth, and in every difficulty lies a lesson. The blind monk and the hammer. Have you ever struggled to see something right in front of you even though everyone else insists it's there? It's frustrating, isn't it? You try your best to focus, but the truth remains hidden, almost like it's mocking you. This was exactly the situation with a young monk and his master. One day, the old monk led his young disciple into a dark room. As the monk gestured toward a corner of the room, he said, "Over there, you'll find a hammer. Do you see it?" The young monk, squinting his eyes and straining his sight, couldn't see anything. No matter how wide he opened his eyes or how much he narrowed them, he couldn't even see his own hand in front of his face. Confused, he turned to his master and said, "Master, I can't see anything at all." The master didn't say a word, but quietly lit a candle. As the soft light spread through the room, the hammer was revealed clearly in the corner. The old monk then asked, "Do you see it now?" The young monk nodded, amazed. The master smiled gently. "You see," he said, "just because you couldn't see it earlier doesn't mean it didn't exist. The darkness concealed it. Sometimes what we cannot see doesn't mean it isn't there. The truth is often hidden, waiting for the right light to reveal it." At that moment, the young monk realized something deep and profound. He had spent his whole life questioning things he couldn't understand. But now he began to see that his lack of understanding didn't mean the truth wasn't there. It was just waiting for the right time, the right circumstances, to be revealed. The story of the salt and the water. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by the difficulties in life? Like a storm of problems swirling around, leaving you with no way to escape? A wise Zen master once used a simple lesson to teach his disciple about the nature of suffering. One day, the master put a spoonful of salt into a glass of water and handed it to his disciple. "Taste it," he said. The disciple took a sip and immediately scrunched up his face. "It's so salty, it's unbearable," he complained. The master didn't respond right away. Instead, he took the disciple to a nearby lake. The master then poured a whole bag of salt into the lake and asked his disciple to taste the water. The disciple took a drink from the lake, and to his surprise, the water tasted perfectly sweet and fresh. "What's going on?" he asked. The master smiled. "The salt didn't change, but the amount of water it mixed with did." In life, suffering is like the salt. It's the same for everyone. But if we allow our hearts and minds to expand, if we open ourselves to life fully, the suffering becomes less harsh. The difference lies in how much space we give it. The disciple understood. He realized that life's difficulties often feel overwhelming because we view them as small, isolated events. But when we let go of our narrow view and embrace the full spectrum of experience, we can find peace even in the midst of challenges. The seeds and the birds. One hot summer day, in the courtyard of the monastery, the grass had dried up. A large patch of land looked barren and ugly. The young monk noticed it and, worried about the appearance of the grounds, suggested to his master, "Master, why don't we plant some seeds here? It would look much better." The master looked calmly at the patch of land. "Don't rush. We will plant the seeds when the time is right," he replied. As days passed, the young monk continued to wonder about the best way to fix the land. Finally, one day, the master handed him a small bag of seeds and said, "Go ahead, plant them." The young monk eagerly scattered the seeds across the ground, but as soon as he did, a strong gust of wind blew through, scattering many of the seeds into the air. The monk rushed to the master and said, "Master, many of the seeds have been blown away by the wind." The master smiled softly. "Don't worry. The seeds that the wind blew away were the bad ones. They would never have sprouted, even if you planted them. Let them go." The monk continued his work, but soon after, a flock of birds flew down and began pecking at the seeds. Panicked, the young monk ran to the master again. "Master, the birds are eating the seeds. What should we do?" The master, still calm, reassured him, "Do not worry. There are plenty of seeds left. The birds can't eat them all." As the days passed, a heavy rainstorm came, washing away much of the remaining seeds. The young monk ran to his master again, tearfully saying, "Master, all the seeds are gone. What now?" The master replied without hesitation, "If the rain has taken them away, then it was meant to be. Let go and trust in the process." The next morning, when the monk returned to the patch of land, he was astonished. In the places where the seeds had been scattered, tiny green shoots were now sprouting. Even in areas where no seeds had been sown, new plants began to grow. The young monk couldn't believe his eyes. "Master, look! The seeds have sprouted, but we didn't even plant them in some of these spots." The master simply nodded. This was always the way it was meant to be. Trust the process, trust in nature, and trust in the right timing. The warrior and the Zen master. Have you ever encountered someone who, in their frustration or anger, just couldn't see the bigger picture? A warrior once approached a Zen master with a question that he thought would be simple to answer. "Master," the warrior asked, "what is the difference between heaven and hell?" The Zen master turned to him and asked, "Who are you?" The warrior replied, "I am a mighty warrior." The master looked at him and with a slight smile said, "A brute like you? How could you ask such a question? You are not worthy of my teachings?" The warrior's face turned red with anger. His hand moved to the hilt of his sword. "I'll show you who I am," he roared, raising his sword and charging at the master. The sword was nearly upon him when the master calmly said, "This is hell." The warrior froze. As he stood there, the truth of the master's words began to sink in. He realized that his anger had clouded his judgment and almost led him to a great mistake. With a deep breath, he lowered his sword and bowed to the master, apologizing for his rash actions. The master smiled gently and said, "This is heaven." The warrior finally understood. In that moment, he saw that heaven and hell were not places far away, but states of mind. Anger and hatred could lead us to destruction, while peace and understanding could guide us to salvation. The power to choose was within him all along. Conclusion: in each of these stories, there is a profound lesson. Sometimes the truth is hidden in darkness, waiting for the right moment to shine through. Sometimes suffering is like salt and water. Its intensity depends on the space we give it. And sometimes life is like a garden. The seeds we plant may not always grow in the way we expect, but they will grow in their own time, in their own way. And as we see in the story of the warrior, heaven and hell are not places outside of us. They are choices we make every day. So what is it that you're holding on to today? Are you stuck in anger, suffering, or frustration? Or can you open your heart and mind to the possibility that there's more to your life than you can see right now? Remember, life is about trusting the process, letting go of what you cannot control, and making space for new growth. The world will reveal its truths to those who are patient, open, and willing to learn. Story: The Parrot and the Crow. One day, a parrot and a crow met each other. The parrot lived in a cage, enjoying a comfortable and easy life. It was well fed and had no worries. Yet, despite its carefree existence, the parrot admired the crow, which was free to fly wherever it wished, soaring high in the open sky. The parrot envied the crow's freedom and longed for the life the crow had, while the crow, on the other hand, envied the parrot's peaceful life in the cage where it was safe and well cared for. Both birds admired what the other had. They talked, and after much thought, they decided to switch places. The parrot would live freely, and the crow would enjoy a life of luxury. The crow eagerly accepted the parrot's life in the cage, hoping to experience the comfort it had always dreamed of. However, once inside the cage, the crow found that the owner didn't love it as much as the parrot, and it was ignored. Eventually, the crow died, filled with frustration and regret. On the other hand, the parrot, now free in the wild, was unable to survive on its own. It had grown so accustomed to a life of comfort that it lacked the skills needed to find food or shelter. The parrot, once joyful in its cage, now faced the harsh realities of nature and eventually perished from hunger and exposure. The lesson here is clear: do not blindly envy the happiness of others, for what seems like a paradise to you may actually become a hardship in your own life. Every person's situation is unique. What brings someone else joy may not bring you the same fulfillment. Focus on living your own life well, appreciating the blessings you have, rather than yearning for what others possess. It is a reminder that contentment and peace come from embracing the life you have, not coveting someone else's. Story: The Donkey and the Two Fathers. There was once a father and son who set off on a journey with a donkey. They were walking beside the donkey when a passerby looked at them and said, "How foolish! They have a donkey, yet neither of them is riding it." The father and son considered the suggestion, and the son then climbed onto the donkey to ride. Not long after, another passerby criticized the son, saying, "What a bad son! He is making his father walk while he enjoys the ride." Feeling embarrassed, the father decided to climb onto the donkey himself, and now a different passerby shouted, "What a cruel father! He's making the poor donkey carry both of them." Finally, the father and son, unable to please anyone, both climbed down and decided to carry the donkey together on their shoulders. The lesson here is that it's impossible to please everyone. If you lack your own firm principles and direction, the opinions of others can easily sway you, leading you to do foolish things. Just like the father and son carrying the donkey, you might find yourself lost in the opinions of others, never truly living your own life. Be firm in your decisions and don't let the judgments of others dictate your actions. Story: The Fox and the Eggs. One day, a fox came across a nest full of delicious eggs. The eggs were tempting, and the fox, though hungry, was too fat to reach them. Determined to enjoy the feast, the fox decided to fast for 3 days, hoping this would allow it to lose enough weight to squeeze into the nest. After fasting for the days, the fox finally managed to crawl into the nest and devour all the eggs, feeling satisfied and full. However, the fox soon realized it had made a grave mistake. After eating, it found itself stuck in the nest. No matter how hard it tried, it couldn't escape. The fox was forced to fast for another 3 days to lose enough weight to squeeze out of the nest. Afterward, it lamented, "I went through all this trouble for a moment of pleasure. In the end, I gained nothing but regret." This story serves as a metaphor for life. We often work hard for material gains or success, thinking that we are doing the right thing. But just like the fox who stuffed itself with eggs, we may reach the end of our lives with nothing but regrets. No matter how hard we try to amass wealth or achievements, we can't take them with us when we're gone. You can spend your whole life working for money, but you can't use money to buy back your youth, your health, or your time. Life is not about accumulating wealth, but learning how to rest and enjoy what truly matters. Story, the teacher, and the parents. During a parent-teacher meeting, the teacher wrote a few simple math problems on the blackboard. 2 plus 2 equals 4, 4 plus 4 equals 8, 8 plus 8 equals 16, 9, plus 9 equals 20. When the parents saw this, they immediately pointed out, the teacher made a mistake in the last equation. The teacher turned to them and said, "Yes, you are correct. I made an error in the last calculation. However, why did no one praise the 3 correct answers I wrote before? Why is it that only one mistake has caught everyone's attention?" The teacher then explained, "My dear parents, education is not just about pointing out mistakes. It is about recognizing and praising the things that are done right. In the same way, in life, if you treat someone well hundreds or even thousands of times, they may come to take it for granted. But the moment you make one mistake, that's what people will remember and focus on." This is a lesson for all of us in our relationships, whether with friends, family, or colleagues. The good things we do are often overlooked, while our mistakes are magnified. The teacher concluded by saying that the essence of relationships is gratitude, appreciation, and understanding. If you want to nurture lasting relationships, remember to acknowledge the good and show appreciation instead of focusing on the faults. Once inside the cage, the crow found that the owner didn't love it as much as the parrot, and it was ignored. Eventually, the crow died, filled with frustration and regret. On the other hand, the parrot, now free in the wild, was unable to survive on its own. It had grown so accustomed to a life of comfort that it lacked the skills needed to find food or shelter. The parrot, once joyful in its cage, now faced the harsh realities of nature and eventually perished from hunger and exposure. The lesson here is clear. Do not blindly envy the happiness of others, for what seems like a paradise to you may actually become a hardship in your own life. Every person's situation is unique. What brings someone else joy may not bring you the same fulfillment. Focus on living your own life well, appreciating the blessings you have, rather than yearning for what others possess. It is a reminder that contentment and peace come from embracing the life you have, not coveting someone else's. Story, the Donkey and the Two Fathers. There was once a father and son who set off on a journey with a donkey. They were walking beside the donkey when a passerby looked at them and said, "How foolish! They have a donkey, yet neither of them is riding it." The father and son considered the suggestion, and the son then climbed onto the donkey to ride. Not long after, another passerby criticized the son, saying, "What a bad son! He is making his father walk while he enjoys the ride." Feeling embarrassed, the father decided to climb onto the donkey himself, and now a different passerby shouted, "What a cruel father! He's making the poor donkey carry both of them." Finally, the father and son, unable to please anyone, both climbed down and decided to carry the donkey together on their shoulders. The lesson here is that it's impossible to please everyone. If you lack your own firm principles and direction, the opinions of others can easily sway you, leading you to do foolish things. Just like the father and son carrying the donkey, you might find yourself lost in the opinions of others, never truly living your own life. Be firm in your decisions and don't let the judgments of others dictate your actions. Story, the Fox and the Eggs. One day, a fox came across a nest full of delicious eggs. The eggs were tempting, and the fox, though hungry, was too fat to reach them. Determined to enjoy the feast, the fox decided to fast for 3 days, hoping this would allow it to lose enough weight to squeeze into the nest. After fasting for the days, the fox finally managed to crawl into the nest and devour all the eggs, feeling satisfied and full. However, the fox soon realized it had made a grave mistake. After eating, it found itself stuck in the nest. No matter how hard it tried, it couldn't escape. The fox was forced to fast for another 3 days to lose enough weight to squeeze out of the nest. Afterward, it lamented, "I went through all this trouble for a moment of pleasure. In the end, I gained nothing but regret." This story serves as a metaphor for life. We often work hard for material gains or success, thinking that we are doing the right thing. But just like the fox who stuffed itself with eggs, we may reach the end of our lives with nothing but regrets. No matter how hard we try to amass wealth or achievements, we can't take them with us when we're gone. You can spend your whole life working for money, but you can't use money to buy back your youth, your health, or your time. Life is not about accumulating wealth, but learning how to rest and enjoy what truly matters. Story, the teacher, and the parents. During a parent-teacher meeting, the teacher wrote a few simple math problems on the blackboard. 2 plus 2 equals 4, 4 plus 4 equals 8, 8 plus 8 equals 16, 9, plus 9 equals 20. When the parents saw this, they immediately pointed out, "The teacher made a mistake in the last equation." The teacher turned to them and said, "Yes, you are correct. I made an error in the last calculation. However, why did no one praise the 3 correct answers I wrote before? Why is it that only one mistake has caught everyone's attention?" The teacher then explained, "My dear parents, education is not just about pointing out mistakes. It is about recognizing and praising the things that are done right. In the same way, in life, if you treat someone well hundreds or even thousands of times, they may come to take it for granted. But the moment you make one mistake, that's what people will remember and focus on." This is a lesson for all of us in our relationships, whether with friends, family, or colleagues. The good things we do are often overlooked, while our mistakes are magnified. The teacher concluded by saying that the essence of relationships is gratitude, appreciation, and understanding. If you want to nurture lasting relationships, remember to acknowledge the good and show appreciation instead of focusing on the faults. Story, the argument over? Numbers one day, 2 men were arguing over a simple math equation. One said, 44 divided by 16 equals 17, and the other insisted, 44 divided by 16 equals 0.2500000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000 On Alta, they argued back and forth with neither willing to concede. Eventually, they decided to take the matter to the local magistrate for a decision. The magistrate listened carefully to both arguments and then declared, "The person who said that 44 divided by 16 equals 17 is correct and may go home. As for the one who insisted it equals 16, he will stay and be punished." The man, who was told he was wrong, confused, and angry, asked the magistrate, "Why did you punish me? I was right." The magistrate replied, "The real crime is not that you were wrong. The real crime is that you, knowing the truth, wasted your time arguing with a fool. You knew the answer, yet you insisted on continuing the argument with someone who was clearly ignorant, wasting both your time and energy. For that, you are being punished." This story teaches us that sometimes the greatest mistake we make in life is engaging in pointless arguments with those who are not willing to listen or learn. There is wisdom in knowing when to walk away, to avoid wasting time on foolish debates that lead nowhere. It's a reminder that life is too short to spend on unnecessary conflict, and sometimes the best action is to simply move on. Story: The Camel and the Fly. A camel was slowly trudging through the scorching desert, step by step, struggling against the relentless heat and endless stretch of sand. On its back, a fly had been resting for a long time without any effort. The fly barely needed to do anything. It was simply carried across the desert without exerting any energy. As they reached the other side of the desert, the fly mockingly spoke to the camel. "Thank you for carrying me across, dear camel. You must have really worked hard to get me to this point. I could hardly have made it on my own." The camel looked at the fly and replied calmly, "When you were on my back, I didn't even know you were there. And when you left, you didn't need to say goodbye. You weren't heavy at all. Don't think too highly of yourself. Who do you think you are?" Story: The Young Writer and His Family. A writer once shared a story from his childhood. He had grown up in a large, multi-generational family. Every meal was a gathering of 10 to 12 people, all sitting together to share a meal. One day, the writer decided to play a little prank to amuse himself and tease his relatives. He crawled into a cupboard before dinner, hoping that no one would notice. He planned to surprise everyone by jumping out and scaring them when they began looking for him. But to his surprise, no one seemed to miss him. When the meal was finished, everyone simply went on with their day. Some went to work, others carried on with their routines. The writer, feeling deflated, crawled out of the cupboard and went to eat whatever leftovers were left. From that day forward, he reminded himself never to take himself too seriously. If you do, you might find yourself deeply disappointed when others don't notice or care. Story: Benjamin Franklin and His Lesson. Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of America, once visited an esteemed elder when he was young. At the time, Franklin was brimming with the energy and self-assurance of youth. He was full of confidence, eager to make an impression. As he entered the house, however, Franklin failed to notice the door frame was lower than expected and bumped his head hard. In pain, he rubbed his forehead, glaring at the door frame. The elder, seeing this, smiled and said, "Does it hurt? Well, this is the greatest lesson you'll learn from your visit today." Story: The Wise Man and the Boy in Trouble. A young man, disillusioned and defeated by life, came to an old wise man for advice. After sharing his story, the wise man said nothing. Instead, he placed a pot on the stove, filled it with water, and added a carrot, an egg, and some salt. As the water boiled, the wise man waited silently, observing. Finally, he lifted the pot's lid and spoke to the boy. Life is full of challenges, trials, and hardships. But what really matters is how you respond to them. Look closely at these three things. The carrot, which was once strong and firm, has become soft and weak after being boiled. The egg, which was fragile, has become hard and tough. The salt, which was small and unassuming, has dissolved completely in the water, changing the flavor of everything around it. The wise man paused for a moment and then continued, "You see, it's not the challenges themselves that define you. It's how you respond to them. Will you soften like the carrot, harden like the egg, or dissolve and change like the salt?" Story: The Boy Who Overcame His Disability. A 10-year-old boy whose left arm had been lost in a car accident decided to study judo. He chose to learn from a skilled Japanese master, believing in his own dedication and hard work. After 3 months of training, he was perplexed. The master had only taught him one technique over and over again. Frustrated, the boy finally asked his teacher, "Why haven't I learned any other techniques? Why is this the only one?" The teacher replied, "This is the only technique you need to learn. It's the one that will carry you through." Despite his confusion, the boy trusted his teacher and continued practicing the single technique. Months passed, and the master entered him in a judo competition. The boy was amazed when he easily won the first 2 matches. The third match was tougher, but his opponent grew impatient and made mistakes, allowing the boy to use his technique to win. But the real test came when he faced a much stronger, more experienced opponent in the final match. The boy was overwhelmed at first, taking hit after hit. By the end of the first round, he was clearly losing, and the referee nearly ended the match early. However, his teacher insisted the match continue, and the boy pushed on. During the second round, the boy's opponent grew overconfident, careless in his attacks, and the boy finally seized his moment. He used the one technique his teacher had taught him to throw the opponent to the ground and win the match. As they headed home, the boy, still stunned by his victory, asked his teacher, "How did I win with just one technique?" The teacher smiled and said, "You won for 2 reasons. First, because you mastered that one technique. Second, because your opponent underestimated you and didn't respect the power of what you had learned." The teacher's response. The teacher answered, "The first reason is that you have nearly mastered one of the most powerful and effective strikes in this martial art." He paused and then added, "The second reason is that the only way your opponent could break that strike is by locking your left arm, but you don't have a left arm." Sometimes a weakness can become the strongest part of a person. Having an advantage is good, but turning a disadvantage into a strength is even more miraculous. Believe in yourself, you can do anything. Story 48, The Fly and the Bee. A fly noticed that its shape closely resembled that of a honeybee, and it took great delight in this discovery. It decided to pretend to be a bee and visit the flowers to steal the sweet nectar, thinking it could fool the flowers into thinking it was a bee. It flew around the flowers again and again, but no matter how many times it passed, it never saw a flower smile at it. The fly was puzzled and went to ask a bee, "Why do the flowers not welcome me?" The bee replied, "You may look like me on the outside, but you are not me on the inside. No matter how many times you fly around the flowers, they will never see you as a bee." Lesson learned: appearance can be deceiving. While 2 things may look alike on the outside, the essence within is irreplaceable. Story 49, The Cup and the Teaching. A young monk approached his master and said, "Master, I feel so tired. Every day I am busy but never seem to focus on anything. What should I do?" The master thought for a moment, then instructed, "Bring me a cup." The monk complied, and the master filled the cup with chestnuts until it was full. "Can you add anything else to the cup?" the master asked. The monk replied, "The cup is full. There is no more room." The master then poured rice into the cup, filling it to the top. "Can you still add anything?" the master asked again. The monk, now understanding, said nothing. The master poured water into the cup until it overflowed. Finally, he took some salt, threw it into the water, and waited until it dissolved completely. The master turned to the young monk and said, "Each of us is like an empty cup. If we fill it with small, insignificant things, there will be no space left for what truly matters. Only when we prioritize the big things can we find time for the most important tasks, which allow us to achieve great things." Story 50, The Basket and the Knowledge. A young child, eager to learn, asked his grandfather, "Grandfather, I read books every day, but I mostly don't understand them. When I close the book, I forget everything I read. What's the point of reading if I don't retain anything?" The grandfather did not answer immediately. Instead, he walked over, picked up a basket, and handed it to the child, saying, "Take this basket and fill it with water, then bring it back to me." The child tried many times, but no matter how hard he tried, the water kept leaking out, and he could not carry any water back. After several attempts, the child looked up at his grandfather, frustrated. "I can't do it. The basket just can't hold water." The grandfather smiled and said, "Look at the basket now." The child looked closely and noticed that the basket, although it couldn't hold water, was much cleaner than before. The grandfather explained, "Just like this basket, when you read books, even if you don't understand or remember everything, your mind is still being cleaned. Over time, the knowledge you gain, even if you don't fully grasp it right away, will stay with you subconsciously. It will eventually shape your wisdom and deepen your understanding of life." Expanded conclusion. These stories remind us that life is filled with lessons that go beyond appearances and immediate results. The fly learned that it's not enough to look like something. The essence of what we do matters more. The young monk learned the importance of prioritizing big things over small distractions. And the child learned that, even when it feels like nothing is being retained, the act of learning itself is a transformative process. Every challenge and every experience, no matter how small, adds something to our journey. So just as the teacher taught, believe in yourself. You may not always understand everything at once, but trust that the wisdom will accumulate and shape you in ways you might not expect. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep trusting that every step you take brings you closer to your true potential.